Michael,
Lino.
welcome. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay. Busy day, busy Wednesday.
Busy Wednesday
Hump
for me
day,
too.
as
Hump
you
day.
would say.
Yes.
But I think
Some
we're
of our
doing.
brothers say.
I think we're doing all right.
Yep.
I think we're doing okay.
We are live again
We
from
are
St. Michael's College
live, Live,
in my office.
the office of Lino.
Right. And today we have chosen to talk or speak about
Catholic social teaching.
teaching. Yes.
Thank you.
And we have chosen that topic because coincidentally, you were teaching that topic
Yeah, I
in
was
your class.
teaching it in my class.
And I am doing a retreat based on Catholic social teaching coming up soon.
So it was just a true meeting of the minds, which
Yeah.
brought it together.
So it was a good idea to do that. Our topic on that tonight.
Why not?
So I saw you brought some points to do.
I brought a
to
couple
make
points.
it.
I mean, it's a broad topic.
Right.
And my sensibility, and you can correct me if you disagree with this, is there's no one document that sort of is like, here is Catholic social. It's a series of documents going as far back, I would say, to Rerum Novarum.
Rerum Novarum was
1891.
considered the first one. Yep.
So that was an encyclical letter from Pope Leo XIII, really on kind of workers and labor was the real thrust of that. But it was starting there, and then there's been a series of documents up until the present day. So some of Pope Francis's documents on the environment, etc., are part of this. So when we talk about Catholic social teaching, it's not one thing or one list of things. It's a variety of documents, a variety of teaching. So I wrote down just a couple points that I think are kind of embodied in that.
But before we go to those topics, Michael, I think that to give like a broad
Context.
picture of it.
Broad picture.
So one of the things that I like about the Catholic social teaching is to say that it evaluates the reality of the human being or of the person in its environment, because we are all encompassing beings.
Right.
So it's not only about the Catholic is not only about the spiritual life of the church, which is one of its jobs, but it's also in the welfare or the well-being of the person where the soul lives.
Sure.
So that's why, as you said, this whole thing started with Leo XIII, and his encyclical Rerum Novarum, and after that, we have a bunch of them. I don't know if you had the class in BC with Catholic social teaching, but
no, I don't think I did have.
I did have it. And we use a red book like this thick, and it has like all the documents.
Oh, that's cool.
And at the end of the book, it has two documents that the bishops of the United States have worked on.
Consolidate it.
Yeah.
Bring it all together.
Bring it all together. Yeah. So I think that that's what the idea of Catholic social teaching goes at, like taking care of the person. And the other thing that I consider well to do, as you know, here at St. Michael's we have volunteer programs, and I think that even for those students of ours that are not Catholic, or even for those students of ours that are not Christians, bringing the mission of our volunteer efforts from the Catholic social teaching is good because they might not agree with what we believe, but they certainly have to agree with the principles that rule Catholic social teaching.
Sure.
Because are the same principles, hopefully, that these students bring to the plate.
Yeah. One of the things that I mentioned in my course was Catholic social teaching can be a moment of dialogue for people that are outside of the faith, because it's points that people can, as you say, believe in, understand, and agree on, even if they don't have a spiritual sense, because it talks about the here and now, the human person, and whatever else it is. As Catholics, we of course believe that you can't really separate those things, the spiritual and the physical, or any of that. But for people that don't have a spiritual sense, this is something that they're able to hold on to and say, okay, like I can walk with this, I can agree with this.
Yeah, and of course the principles that Catholic social teaching holds to be true come down from the light of Jesus and what Jesus did. I mean, that it's not that the church pulled these principles out of thin air, but
exactly.
But the idea is that these principles are people can agree with these principles even though they might not agree on our beliefs.
Right.
Which I think, and I also, like you said, it's a bridge between believers and non-believers, and how to talk about these things.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know if you want to.
No, I think that provides a little bit of background.
Yep.
It's, I don't know if I'm struggling. Struggling isn't the word, but to come up with an overarching sense of just what these things are. One of the points that I have in my mind that kind of lies at the bottom of this, or the top of this, or permeates this in all directions, would be a belief in inherent human dignity, and a belief that humans are called to live with one another in the world, in a community, and therefore looking after the common good rather than just the individual. To me, those are factors that are kind of foundational to this.
Yeah, and it is called the social Catholic teaching of the Church because, as you mentioned, Pope Leo XIII wrote this when industrialization was coming around.
Exactly.
There were a lot of, because the industrialization was something new, the workers were being submitted to some not illegal, but
well, very difficult conditions.
Conditions.
I mean, the conditions in factories was just awful, and it was kind of dehumanizing.
And long hours and exploitation of children,
child labor, like all sorts of things. So it was written in reaction to that initially.
Right, and that encyclical brought another ones later on in the same kind of theme, but addressing their new realities. Two that come to mind were Octagesimum Annum, or something like that. Sorry, pardon my Latin.
I know what you're referring to, but I'm not going to correct you because I can't remember the name of the number.
But
it's a number in Latin.
Yeah, it's a number in Latin, and it means that the 80 years of
after
the
Rerum Novarum,
because sort of every time there was a the 40th anniversary. So popes in a significant year of anniversary of Rerum Novarum kind of reevaluate the reality of the world that had to do with human beings and their labor and how people were doing in the world. So reevaluate the whole situation and then write about it and point out what was good and point out what was not that great, how the principles change if they change, or if we included new principles. So that's how these have been working around. And then, as you said, one of the most recent was Laudato Si, the Pope not talking mostly about human beings, but about the environment and how we damaging the environment without damaging ourselves and creation as a whole.
Right. So that's a little bit of a flavor of kind of what we're talking about here. But I want to, if I may, just touch on that human dignity piece, because I think that's at the core of this. This notion that all humans, regardless of your background, regardless of your social standing, regardless of anything, just by virtue of you being human, means that you have an inherent worth and value, and that it's equal to any other person. I think that is kind of a core foundational thought when we're thinking about Catholic social teaching, and how then our society ideally should be a reflection of a system that values individual worth and individual dignity, and makes sure that people have living conditions needed to bring about their own flourishing, their own happiness, and what have you.
I'm being aware that you are the same as your peer. There's nothing that makes you better or worse.
Exactly.
In that sense, and we are a bunch of human beings. We are being the same.
Exactly.
So I think that is a really good thing that the Catholic social teaching brings, that notion of the human dignity.
Absolutely.
That just for the fact that we have some intrinsic dignity.
Sure.
Of course, that comes from the religious background is creation, and because we are human beings, we believe are the
image and
likeness of God. That's where we believe that dignity comes from. From the moment of creation.
Exactly.
Because God created us in His image. So.
Yep, absolutely. So I think that's an important piece of it. That's kind of a foundational piece in my conception. Some of the things that I have here have to do with, I guess, what I would call lived reality. So this notion that as people, we do have things in our lives, things that we own, things that we possess. I have written down here private property. That being said, if we have a right to our own property, i.e.,
Right.
if you yourself are cold, you have a right to clothing. You have a right to shelter, things like this, things that you own yourselves. But the key is to not allow that to become something that gets carried away. So you may have a right to things that are enough for what you need, but you may not have a right to owning all of everything to the extent that people that need whatever this is are not able to access it.
Yep.
Okay, so there's limits to private ownership that are talked about in this, and if any one person or entity dominates a particular resource, that would be viewed as problematic. But it's not something that can be fit into socio or political models. So on the one hand, in saying that you are able to have some degree of private property, that kind of is, if not a critique, a rejection of some aspects of a fully socialistic understanding of things. But by saying, too, that there should be limits to what you own or what you can't own, that's a critique of a capitalistic system as well. So it's this, you can't put this in a political box, as it were. People maybe try to, but it's not something that is on the left of the political spectrum or the right of the political spectrum or whatever it is.
So it's like they call it capitalism with conscience.
Right.
I think that what you're saying is that you can own things insofar as that owning doesn't go against the other or the other's dignity.
Yeah, so if you owning something means that somebody else therefore will go without that something that they need, that's not just, and that would be against a core of Catholic social teaching.
And that's what's the principle also what Pope Leo XIII was criticizing in his encyclical, that all these people that own the capital and own the factory, they, because they own it, they could do whatever they wanted to their employees.
Exactly, to the labor.
And the labor became, when the employees became like a possession in it, they lost their in the eyes of the owner of the factory, they lost their dignity, and they started seeing them as an object.
Exactly.
And things that they can handle like a property.
Exactly. So they becoming dehumanized goes against the notions of human dignity, which is the core foundation of this. Tied into that piece, so I'll kind of segue here.
Yep.
Would be if a person is a person of dignity and is employed or whatever it is, in finding honest work, they have, ideally, this isn't always true in reality, but ideally, work will provide a living wage.
Yep.
And what that means is enough money from the work that you do that allows you to have a family, have a shelter to be able to provide for yourself. So there should be a system in place where the honest work that people do gives them, the benefits that they need in order to live and live a successful life. Without getting too political, I don't know if that's always the case in the world that we live in, right? But that's something that we are called to be vocal about and to call to promote.
Yep.
And
especially in underdeveloped countries where we have these sweatshops and all this things that in order to get merchandise cheaper, we abuse, if you will,
absolutely,
or even those technology companies that were in the press a few years ago because they were using child labor, kind of abusing and the need, abusing and using other people's needs in order to make a profit. So I think that's when we don't agree.
Yeah.
Or social Catholic teaching says like, hey, what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a critique of many social orders that exist in many places in the world. And to build off of that, too, I would say that in addition to a living wage, the labor itself, the work itself, again, this is all ideal. I'm not saying that this exists in the world, but we hope that this will come to exist at some point or put practices in place to make it exist. But the work that you do should serve a purpose, that the work should have value, that it should contribute to a greater good. and that it can contribute to the individual's sense of self-worth in what they do. So in a situation where you are essentially like a slave in a factory, I mean, that's kind of an oppressive thing. If a person would be able to have a say in what it is that they are producing or creating, or have a recognition or understanding that it contributes to a larger purpose than just, creating money or something. Again, this maybe sounds kind of utopian, as it were, but why not? We live in the world, and we hope for a future where we can bring the kingdom of God about in the best way we can.
Yeah, but work is not only to make money.
Exactly.
It's to grow as a human being.
Exactly. That's the bottom line.
And to contribute to society as a useful member of society.
Exactly.
So by the time you finish your job, the world, you will be a better person, and the world will be a better world too.
Exactly.
Not just mechanized and doing your job because you need to provide for your family, which is great.
Sure.
But that's not the only purpose of work. The purpose of work is to fulfill yourself as a person, as an individual.
Exactly. Say more if you wish. That's what was bumping around in my head, and obviously this is a great simplification, but in terms of the wage and labor and work aspect of Catholic social teaching, those are some of the points that I had in mind. I have other things to talk about as well that I don't think are directly related to labor as such, but
you want me to give you I don't get the question, sorry.
I mean, I have things I want to talk about related to Catholic social teaching that I don't feel are directly related to labor and to work. So, but if you have more to say,
no, I think that
before I move along
on those topics we covered what need to be done. We said, I mean, I think the bottom line is that have a job that is meaningful,
right?
That it makes the person grow as a person, as an individual, and also contribute to society, and that job provides for the basic needs of the individual and family. I think that's the bottom line.
I think so too. If I've got things I can talk about,
sure,
so
go for it.
I'll dive into this. I think no discussion of social teaching would be complete without mentioning the notion of subsidiarity, which essentially is a concept that says decisions are best made at the lowest possible level. And I guess how to unpack that would be, if it's, for example, this is not necessarily a real world thing, but just an example, something that affects like you and I, maybe the campus ministry office directly. The people that are best in a position to know what decisions need to be made there would be people that work with campus ministry already, that know kind of the atmosphere on the ground, and know the players and the best way to make a decision. That's a better way to do things than to get a directive from who knows who.
The Pope.
Yeah. God bless Pope Francis, and it's not that he doesn't have insight, but he doesn't have the time or probably the interest to kind of make personnel decisions for campus ministry at St. Michael's College. So it would be maybe off-putting for us to get a command from the Pope to say, discuss, what color shoes you're going to wear and staff.
Right.
I mean, that's a stupid example, but this notion that there are sort of layers to how humans structure ourselves, and perhaps there's a reason and a utility and a purpose behind different levels of authority. But the best decisions are those that are made at the appropriate level. So if it's something that's at a lower level, the best decision is made by kind of lower level leaders, and then you kind of move up the ladder as the issue grows larger and larger. But empowering people within a structure to be decision makers as they're best able to is kind of...
I see subsidiarity kind of like the anti-micromanaging principle in the church.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, as you were saying, I mean, the bishop and the pope, they have responsibilities. They don't need to care for what's going on, the color of flowers they're going to use in the parish for Easter. Right. That's something that the parish and the pastor should decide. So that's what I see subsidiarity is, the way of the church saying we don't micromanage around here. Sometimes not true, but that's the thing.
It's the ideal.
That's the ideal.
These are
the
ideals.
principle is that the decisions will be done at the lowest level, and if those lowest level cannot, it obviously it will climb to whatever it has to be done. But subsidiarity definitely a good principle to have, I think.
I would agree. I would agree. The next piece of the puzzle in my conception is I have written down here care for the earth. And basically, the way that I would characterize this based on my reading of the situation is if we are, as people, responsible for the common good of one another, part of that responsibility is to care for, in the words of Pope Francis, our common home, that is the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So we only have one world, okay? And this is what we have to go and live in. And so making sure that the world isn't trashed is important. And I think it's doubly important because the societies and the cultures typically that are the biggest producers of pollution and are the biggest contributors to things that kind of harm the environment, they produce these things, and the people that feel the effects of it most acutely would be people in more impoverished situations, more impoverished societies, that don't have the power to fight back, as it were. So it's not only an environmental issue, it's a justice issue, a human justice issue, and it's all kind of interwoven. We are stewards of the world. We've been given creation which is good to take care of and to cultivate. We haven't been given it to destroy. We haven't been given it to, totally rule it over and make a mess of it. We have a responsibility to it. We're servants and stewards of the world. And so we want to make sure that we have a world to live in and to give future generations. That's very much part of that common good and human dignity piece.
Now you mentioned that, I was on YouTube watching a video of they were interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they were talking about a possible colony of people on Mars. And one of the ideas he was saying like that it didn't make sense is from the fact that if you want to have a colony of people in Mars, you will have to terraform Mars.
Right.
So make Mars to be more like Earth so we can live there. He said, if we're going to have the technology to do that, why don't you invent the technology and do it here?
Right, do it. Yeah. No.
Why to invest in Mars when you can do it here? So I think that was a great comment he made. And I think that's the idea of what Laudato Si comes, but also that care for the environment and from the earth that you were talking about, is that so this is our planet, this is the place we would live, and we have to care for it.
Absolutely.
Not only because it's God's creation, and as you said, we were put here to be the tenants of it. And tenants doesn't mean trash it and go leave. Tenants means taking care of it. But also that idea of this is the only one we have. So if it goes, if it's not suitable for human life, that's it. That's the end of
absolutely game over.
Game over. So it's also the thing it has to do with responsibility in the sense that we might trash the environment right now, and generations have done it, especially the last 4 or 5 generations with industrial and technology, and we're not the ones paying the consequences.
Right, it's future generations.
The future generations.
Exactly.
I won't say your sons and daughters because we won't have sons and daughters.
Not specifically our sons and daughters.
But the future generations definitely are ones that are going to pay the debt, if you will, of us not caring for the environment.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something not only Christians but everybody should pay attention to.
Absolutely. Another piece of the puzzle, this is kind of my last general thought, issues of war and peace. So warfare has existed in human society probably as long as human society has existed. And
Cain killed Adam.
Exactly. Well, Cain killed Abel.
Adam.
That's all right. We're good. I got you.
Long day.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. And I'm not going to defend warfare in any way, shape, or form. You perhaps, I'm not saying certainly, but you could perhaps say that there are wars that need to be fought. I don't know what the circumstances would be, but before any entity that has the power to make war does so, Catholic social teaching would really ask that all avenues are considered. What's the impact that this will have? What will this bring about? Will going to war for a cause bring about something worse than what that cause initially was? And in any case, warfare should always be an absolute last resort, should not be entered into lightly, and it should be recognized as a very grave issue that brings about evil, certainly, and is not something that should be sought after or encouraged or anything like that. And certain types of warfare, particularly warfare that utilizes tools like nuclear weapons, that can never be justified, because that destroys whole cities, destroys whole cultures, indiscriminately. Innocent people as well as, those that might be responsible for the warfare or whatever. So there's lines drawn in the sand, as it were, that say, be very serious when you think of all the consequences of this, and don't take this as something that's very casual. And my sensibility, maybe this is naive, my sensibility is that warfare shouldn't exist, that it should go away, and that, how often can we find causes that are really necessary for doing this? I don't know. I'm not going to say, it's not my place to say that there's never a cause or never a consequence, but it has to be something that's very, very high bar set before people consider this.
Yeah. I think you have said that. Anything that had to be said there.
Yeah. Heavy topic, heavy
totally.
issue.
Especially in a world that we're living now, where there are so many conflicts and
Absolutely.
armed conflicts,
Absolutely.
and the news about what is going on in Syria currently. Not only talking about war against country or nation against nation, but war that happens between people in the same country.
Right. Civil conflict, civil war.
People killing each other for reasons that shouldn't be there. So I know this is kind of sad theme and a sad topic, but I think that
it's heavy.
It is heavy, and it's important to talk about.
Yeah, and it's within the framework, again, of something that I think is very hopeful, which is this notion of Catholic social teaching, that here are tools that we have at our disposal that come from our faith, that come from our tradition, that come to a very large extent from the teachings of Christ himself, and we strive to put these into practice in our daily lives, not only as individuals, but as a society. That's the goal that we work towards in this life.
Yep, but that's the idea that Catholics will abide.
Yep, absolutely.
In an utopical earth.
Yep.
We all abide by these principles.
And we live in the world as people of hope. Things might look grim, things might look dark, but with our faith, particularly in the Easter season in the resurrected Christ, we believe that there is a capacity to overcome this hardship, and that good things can and will continue to blossom in the world, which is God's creation.
So, I think that I'll cover it from today,
that's what
Michael.
That's what I got.
As I said, maybe a little grim today, but at least this will foster conversations among
it's real,
among people, and will make you continue to think about it, and continue to look upon it, and if maybe create an interest on your part, you can Google these Catholic social teaching, and you will find thousands of more things you can dig in, or you can find those documents we said that the popes throughout the history of the church have written. I told you there's a book like this thick, and that was a few years ago. There's Laudato Si not in there, so there's a lot of reading.
You got your work cut out for you.
So we hope that you enjoyed this show, and as usual, please subscribe if you haven't done so, like it or dislike it. And we will see you
later
next week.
Fare thee well.
Bye-bye, folks.